They were attacked while they were sleeping. One person was killed and several others injured. The attackers fled the scene before the police arrived, but all their crimes would soon be uncovered. This is the story of the brutal attack in a small town. It all started in the quiet seaside town of Villasimius in Sardinia, Italy. It was a beautiful summer night with temperatures around 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Families enjoyed a stroll along the beach promenade, sipping wine and gelato as the sun dipped below the horizon. But there was trouble brewing. A group of strangers had come to this idyllic place, and their intentions were far from friendly. They were looking for a fight, and they weren't afraid to start one. And what happened next would shock the entire nation. Meanwhile, back at the campsite, a family of 4 from Rome was settling in for the night. The husband, 54-year-old Francesco, helped their 2 teenage kids set up their tent. Meanwhile, their dog barked happily, enjoying the evening breeze. After a long day of traveling, everyone was exhausted. So, after a quick dinner of sandwiches and fruit, they crawled into their tent to sleep. Little did they know that this would be the last peaceful night they would spend together. Outside, in the darkness, the group of strangers were getting ready to cause havoc. Their leader was 24-year-old Andrea, who had been in trouble with the law before. He had a criminal record for theft, resisting arrest, and carrying illegal weapons. But those charges were just a small part of the iceberg. Andrea was also the ringleader of a local gang known for its extreme right-wing views and violent activities. The gang had been involved in numerous fights with rival groups in the area, and they were always looking for new ways to make trouble. On this night, they decided to target the unsuspecting family in the campsite. With several members of his gang by his side, Andrea snuck closer to the tents. As he approached, he could hear the soft snores of the sleeping family. It was almost like a lullaby to him, a tune that lulled him into a false sense of security. He signaled to his accomplices, and they began their attack. One of them, armed with a stick, smashed it against the tent, creating a hole big enough for them to crawl through. Another held a knife, its blade glinting menacingly in the moonlight. And so they entered the tent, silently at first, like ghosts in the night.
Then the chaos began.
Francesco woke up with a start. He felt a searing pain in his leg, as if someone had stabbed him with a sharp object. Groaning, he turned to see his wife cowering in the corner, her face pale with fear. Their 2 children were also terrified, their eyes wide with disbelief. But it was their dog that truly stole Francesco's attention. He was whimpering, his body trembling as he tried to protect his family. The sight of their dog in distress made Francesco's blood boil. Filled with a surge of protective instinct, he lunged towards the intruder, trying to drive them away. However, he was met with a vicious kick to the head. Dazed and disoriented, Francesco collapsed to the ground. His wife screamed out in horror as the attackers descended upon him, kicking and punching him mercilessly. In a panic, Francesco's wife grabbed a wooden stake from nearby and swung it at the attackers. She managed to hit one of them, sending him sprawling, but this only seemed to enrage them further. One of the attackers grabbed the stake from her and used it to smash the tent, trapping her inside with their screaming children. Meanwhile, outside the tent, the attackers had gathered around Francesco. They were taunting him, reveling in his pain. But little did they know that their night of terror was about to come to an abrupt end. Just then, a patrol car drove past the campsite. The sudden appearance of the police caused the attackers to flee, giving them a chance to escape. The couple quickly unzipped the tent and stumbled out, their bodies aching and their minds in shock. They rushed to their car and sped away from the campsite, leaving the nightmare behind. At the hospital, doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize Francesco's condition. He had suffered a punctured lung, a broken rib, and multiple stab wounds. Despite the severity of his injuries, he was expected to survive, but the same couldn't be said for the other victim. One of the tent pegs had pierced through another man's skull, proving to be a fatal injury. His life hung in the balance as doctors fought to save him, but it was a losing battle. The man was pronounced dead at the hospital, becoming the first victim of this brutal crime. The news of the attack sent shockwaves through the small town. People were horrified and saddened by what had happened. The local priest offered his condolences to the family, and the town began to mourn the loss of the young man. However, there was still justice to be served. The police were determined to find the people responsible for this heinous crime and bring them to justice. but they had very little to go on. Despite the horrific nature of the attack, no one had witnessed it. All the police had to go on were the victim's descriptions and the scant evidence left behind at the crime scene. But they were not deterred. The investigation took a significant turn when the police found a crucial piece of evidence, a half-smoked joint left behind by one of the attackers. DNA analysis later revealed that it belonged to Andrea, the ringleader of the local gang. With this breakthrough, the police were finally able to put a name to the face of their prime suspect. This meant that the police now had a cat-and-mouse game on their hands. They knew that Andrea was out there somewhere, and they would stop at nothing to bring him to justice. Meanwhile, the victims were struggling to come to terms with what had happened to them. Francesco was physically recovering, but the emotional scars of the attack ran deep. He couldn't understand why anyone would want to hurt him and his family. He remembered the look of pure terror on his wife and children's faces and the helpless whimpers of their dog. The trauma of that night continued to haunt him. As days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted on Andrea to turn himself in. The police were closing in on him, and he knew that his time was running out, but he wasn't going down without a fight. In a desperate attempt to evade capture, Andrea went off the grid, cutting off all contact with his friends and family. He moved from one place to another, always looking over his shoulder, never quite sure when the police might catch up to him. But his efforts to stay hidden were futile. The police were on his trail, following every lead, no matter how small. Finally, the day came when the net closed in on Andrea. The police received a tip-off that he was hiding in an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town. A team of officers was sent to the location, and when they entered the farmhouse, they found Andrea hiding in a secret compartment under the floorboards. He was arrested without incident and taken into custody. The police were jubilant. They had caught their man, but Andrea was far from repentant. He was defiant, cursing the police and vowing to make their lives hell. But his tough talk didn't fool anyone. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he knew that he was in for a world of hurt. At his trial, Andrea was charged with a multitude of crimes, including murder, attempted murder, and assault, but he refused to cooperate. He pleaded not guilty to all charges, claiming that he was innocent. However, the jury saw through his lies. They found him guilty on all counts and sentenced him to a lengthy prison term. His accomplices were also caught and brought to justice. As for the victims, they were left to pick up the pieces of their lives.